Atlantic Telegraph Cables Trail, gCábla Telegraphach Atlantach. The story. The Atlantic Telegraph Cables Trail, gCábla Telegraphach Atlantach, was installed by Heritage Ivara, Iirecht Ivráig. Its illustrated information plaques and plinths tell the amazing story of how the spectacularly beautiful Skellig coast of southwest Kerry in Ireland became the 19th century centre of global communications. There are 4 areas of the trail: Valentia, Ballinskelligs and Waterville, where cable stations were located, and the Cahersiveen area, where the first attempt to lay a cable was made in 1857. A brochure with maps of the trail is available in tourism and other outlets. It can also be accessed with the QR code on the brochure and on the individual plaques plinths, or at https://atct.cablehistory.org, hosted by Bill Burns on his great website https://atlantic-cable.com, which, along with the books and papers of Donald de Cogan, cable historian, should be the first stops in any cable telegraphy research. There is further information in visitor centres along the trail, as well as a viewing point. Here in August 1857, at the White Strand, Cahersiveen, on the shore of Valentia Harbour in County Kerry, Ireland, was witnessed the beginning of an amazing project: to lay 2,000 miles of telegraphic cable from Ireland to Newfoundland. When completed, transatlantic messages that previously took weeks would ultimately become virtually instantaneous. It would revolutionise the communications, the economies, and the political and social interactions, not alone of Europe and America, but of the whole world. America and Europe already had been widely traversed by overland and underwater telegraphs, including short cables under the English Channel and the Irish Sea. It was inconceivable to many, however, that cables could be laid over a distance of 2,000 miles and at depths of up to 2,600 fathoms. It was not inconceivable, however, to one man, the dynamic American businessman Cyrus Westfield, who took on the mammoth task of organising this great Anglo-American venture. Field enlisted the aid of some of the world's foremost experts in science, engineering, shipping and finance, some of whom joined his Atlantic Telegraph Company. The cable was to be laid between Ireland and Newfoundland. Largely through the influence of the Knight of Kerry, Sir Peter Fitzgerald, the philanthropic Valentia landlord, Valentia Harbour was selected as the European terminus of the cable. Here at the White Strand on the mainland near Cahersiveen was the selected landing area. An overland line was laid from the White Strand to connect it to the telegraph network at Killarney. Newfoundland and New York were linked by overland and submarine cables. A tent was erected at the White Strand as a temporary station. 2,500 miles of cable had been manufactured in the UK at a cost of £225,000, €25.5 million today. It consisted of a copper core covered by insulating layers of gutta percha, which is the sap of a Malayan tree and a first cousin of latex rubber, and hemp, tar, pitch, etc., with an outer armouring layer of iron wires. It weighed 1 ton per nautical mile. Shorter lengths, called shore ends, with extra armouring to prevent damage by waves, rocks, anchors, etc., were made for use near the landing areas. The converted US warship Niagara and HMS Agamemnon each loaded half the cable in the UK and set off. They were escorted by a fleet of ships known as the Wire Squadron. They arrived in Valentia harbour on the 4th of August. Prayers were followed by a grand ball and merrymaking until dawn in Knightstown. On the 5th of August 1857, the first Atlantic ship-to-shore telegraph cable was laid into the beach here. Lord Carlisle, the Lord Lieutenant, made a speech to the large crowd present. The cable, supported by paddle steamers and small boats, was brought from the Niagara to the tent here. Niagara was to lay its cable to mid-Atlantic, where both ships would meet and splice their cables, with the Agamemnon continuing to lay the cable to the settlement of Bay Bull Arm in Trinity Bay, Newfoundland. At dawn on the 6th of August, the fleet set off. The cable broke after 5 miles and was repaired. It broke again on the 11th of August at 385 nautical miles, but could not be recovered. The valuable lessons learned here played a vital role in subsequent successes. On the 23rd of August, the Knight of Kerry had his first direct telegraph link with Dublin via a cable that had been laid from the White Strand to Knightstown. On the 29th of July 1858, after a number of mishaps, in one of which Agamemnon was almost lost in an 8-day storm, the two ships met in mid-Atlantic and spliced their cables. Niagara headed west and Agamemnon headed east. Disaster almost occurred when a large whale dived under the cable, just missing it. Niagara landed its cable at Bay Bull Arm in Trinity Bay, Newfoundland on the afternoon of the 5th of August, while Agamemnon landed its cable here in Knightstown in Valentia Island at 3 p.m. on the 5th of August. In his enthusiasm to help pull the cable ashore, the Knight of Kerry fell into the water. The cable was routed to a building in the nearby slate yard, where slate from the Valentia slate quarry was processed. The first signals across the Atlantic were received here. The old and the new worlds were connected. On the 13th of August, the first clear message was received here from Newfoundland. On the 16th of August, the first public message, which was sent in Morse code, read, "From the directors, Atlantic Telegraph Company, Great Britain, to directors in America. Europe and America are united by telegraphy. Glory to God in the highest. On earth, peace, goodwill towards men." Messages were exchanged between Queen Victoria and President Buchanan. The Queen's message of 98 words took 16 hours to transmit. Worldwide celebrations ensued. However, the joy was short-lived. After 27 days of steadily deteriorating signals and 732 messages, the cable failed. The last intelligible word was forward, which may have encouraged Cyrus Field to begin new fundraising efforts. Again, as in the 1857 failed attempt, the further lessons learned in 1858 greatly expedited later attempts. Staff members were retained at the cable office here from 1858 to 1861, carrying out experiments on the failed cables. The 1858 venture has been described as a bold, beautiful failure. Fundraising was impossible during the American Civil War, but by 1865 a new attempt was possible. The Knight of Kerry fought hard to ensure that Valentia was retained as the European terminus. On the 22nd of July 1865, in the presence of a huge crowd here at Foilhummerin Bay, Valentia, the shore end of a cable was manoeuvred through the bay on top of many small boats. The SS Caroline took it to the Great Eastern, which had arrived near the Skellig Rocks with 2,600 miles of cable. The Great Eastern was the world's largest ship at that time. On board were 500 men, no women, a black cat and a jackdaw, and enough provisions for all, including live food, a cow, oxen, pigs, sheep and fowl. The commander was James Anderson, and the first officer was Wicklow man Robert Halpin. The Caroline's cable was spliced to the Great Easterns. The voyage began on the 26th of July. The cable broke 606 nautical miles off its destination, Heart's Content in Trinity Bay, Newfoundland. On Friday the 13th of July 1866, ignoring superstition, the ship set out once more and reached Heart's Content on the 27th of July. When the shore end was being brought to the wooden cable house, there was wild excitement. In delight, one man put his mouth to the end of the cable and sucked it. This was the first permanent transatlantic cable, and the first official message was sent on the 28th of July. By the 31st of August, the 1865 cable had been found and raised from 2.5 miles of water. It was connected to Heart's Content on the 8th of September. Other cables were later laid into or near the bay. A Valentia slate cable memorial by the sculptor Alan Ryan Hall was erected by Valentia Heritage Centre on top of the Foilhummerin Cliff, near what must have been Ireland's most dangerous outdoor dancing platform. The 1865 and 1866 cables into Foilhummerin Bay terminated in a wooden hut in the Telegraph field here, across the road from the bay. The engineer supervising the laying of the cable over the high cliff was so scared of heights that he had to be tied to a chair and lowered by rope to do his job. James Graves was the first superintendent. Having to service the accumulated debts of £7 million meant that high tariffs were charged, making cablegrams available only to the very rich. Measurements were made here in 1866 to determine the correct longitude of America relative to Europe. This greatly reduced the loss of lives and ships that had been caused by previous errors. A stone relay building, whose ruins remain, was built later. Here at Ballycarbery Castle near Cahersiveen, local Fenian leaders gathered on the 12th of February 1867 to join a planned Fenian rising. A green flag was flown on the castle as a signal to the insurgents to convene and to attack Cahersiveen Constabulary Barracks and to destroy the Valentia cable station. The presence nearby of a British gunboat prevented the attack. The Fenians marched towards Killarney to join the rising, not knowing that it had been called off. some were arrested and jailed. Please note that for safety reasons, no access is allowed to the castle. While in this area, take some time to explore the magnificent old stone forts nearby. In 1868, Foyle-Hummerin operations moved to the new Thomas N. Dean designed building here in Knightstown. It included offices and staff accommodation. At its 1920 peak, it had over 220 staff. The station now houses the Eighth Wonder Visitor Centre. Hopes are high that the application for UNESCO World Heritage Site status for the transatlantic cable ensemble of the Valentia and Hearts Content cable stations will be successful. Born in 1833, James Graves was superintendent of the Foyle-Hummerin cable station from 1865 to 1868, and of the Knightstown station from 1868 to 1909. He was a famous cable repair expert and was very interested in the welfare of his staff. He lived there until he retired in 1909, when he went to live in the nearby Atlantach villa. He died in 1911. 3 generations of his family worked in the station, and a family member still has a holiday home there. In 1870, an underwater cable was laid from the Knightstown cable station to connect it to the landline telegraph system here at Renard Point, Carsavine. Renard Point later became the most westerly railhead in Europe. After the 1867 Fenian plan to attack Valentia cable station had been foiled, the constabulary barracks here in Carsavine was built in the early 1870s to deter any future attacks. Burned in 1922 during the Irish Civil War, it has been restored as a heritage centre. Its exhibitions include the story of the Atlantic telegraph cables. In 1871, the Foyle-Hummerin wooden hut was dismantled and re-erected near here at Farranriach, Valentia, as a hospital. It was later replaced by new buildings and dismantled once more and sold. It later formed part of the home of Marie Claire Stacey in Dukes, Glenbeigh, County Kerry. In 1874, the Direct United States Telegraph Company, using the Siemens Brothers Company ship Faraday and Siemens Cable, laid the shore end of their cable from Ballinskelligs Bay into the station here. The cable started in Rye Beach in the USA and headed towards Ballinskelligs Bay via Tor Bay in Nova Scotia. Due to legal and other problems, the station did not begin operations until September 1875. In 1882, underwater and landline cables joined the station to the Valentia station as part of a tariff-fixing cartel. In 1911, both stations came under the control of Western Union. In 1920, it was bought by the British Post Office. It closed in 1923 and passed to the new Irish state. It became an Irish language college and was later demolished. 4 staff houses survive, as well as Kennard House, the nearby residence of the station superintendent. The caravan park of the Keating family later occupied the former site of the cable station. During the landing of the Ballinskelligs cable, a coil of it fell into deep water. For his role in recovering the cable and pulling it ashore, local man Donogh O'Leary was given a gold coin, and the cable was named Cable O'Leary. The O'Leary family became known as the Cable O'Learys. This story was told by the local historian, the late Leo O'Shea. In 1882, the German Union Telegraph Company laid a cable to Feilhummeren from Emden in Germany. In 1887, some Feilhummeren Bay cables were suffering damage by rocks and copper ore in the seabed. They were diverted to a telegraph hut here at Cooscrown Harbour, Cahersiveen. They were taken underground to the White Strand, from where they were taken underwater to the Knightstown cable station. The plaque here commemorates the Commercial Cable Company's Waterville station, which played a pivotal role in the growth of world communications. It brought about real competition. This heralded an era of technological change and cheap communication for all. This is where, in Waterville in 1884, using the seaman's ship Faraday, the Commercial Cable Company landed its first transatlantic cables from Canso in Nova Scotia. Other cables, including cables to the United Kingdom and the continent, were subsequently laid from here. The cables went underground to the nearby cable station. Occasionally, the cables may be exposed and seen on the beach here. Iveragh Lodge, built in 1858 as a hunting lodge, served as the original cable offices and superintendent's residence. When the office was moved to a new building in 1899, Iveragh Lodge remained as the superintendent's residence until 1964. This was the original entrance to the station. As the station expanded, additional entrances were constructed, and this entrance was modified to a pedestrian right-of-way. Lost for over 3 decades, this latitude and longitude stone was originally erected in the 1890s and commemorates the station's collaboration with Greenwich Observatory and McGill University to determine the exact longitude of Montreal in 1892. This resulted in changing the clocks of North America and beyond. This building, designed by renowned Irish architect J.F. Fuller, housed the offices from 1899 to 1964. Waterville was one of the largest cable stations in the world, with a peak staff of about 300. One of 2 water towers, this had a rooftop storage tank. The company's fire engine was housed on the ground floor. The information plinth relates to the fascinating story of the German airmen who were briefly detained here in World War II after their Ju-88 warplane crash-landed near Waterville. We are now standing in Waterville Cable Station. There is a plaque on the N70 boundary wall nearby for further information. From here, you can stroll around the Victorian-era planned development, with its offices, support buildings, shop, school, sports amenities, and bachelor and family residences. Cyrus Field died on the 12th of July 1892. His tombstone reads, Cyrus West Field, to whose courage, energy and perseverance the world owes the Atlantic Telegraph. The Atlantic College of Wireless and Cable Telegraphy in Cahersiveen was operated from 1911 to 1919 by Maurice Fitzgerald, formerly of Ballinskellig's cable station. Wireless and cable operators were trained here. These included Republican Con Keating of Renard, Cahersiveen, who died along with two comrades in 1916 in a failed attempt to steal radios from here for the 1916 Easter Rising. The building has also housed a hospital and county council offices. It is now privately owned. Waterville Cable Station had a similar college. Guards and censors were present in the cable stations during World War I. An illicit message sent from Valentia Cable Station by two of its employees, the Ring brothers, informed the world of the 1916 Easter Rising. In 1922, during the Irish Civil War, Waterville and Valentia operations were disrupted by Republican forces. In August, irregulars seized and held the Waterville station for 20 days. Valentia closed for a few months. The three stations set up an interstation operation by cross-connection of cables and were able to communicate with each other and with London and Dublin, an early World Wide Web perhaps. Troops of the Irish Free State government took over and guarded the stations. They maintained contact with each other by telegraph. In 1923, the Ballinskellig station closed. Waterville's renowned Innie Strand beach here was the landing site for some of the commercial cable companies' later cables, including what became known as the Giant Cable of 1923. This 4,800 nautical mile cable from New York to Waterville via Canso and the Azores, extending to Le Havre, was the last and fastest Waterville cable laid. Waterville Cable Station employees were instrumental in the formation of a 9-hole golf links, from which the Waterville Golf Links Championship course evolved. On the 21st of May 1927, on his solo New York to Paris non-stop flight, Charles Lindbergh flew over here and over Waterville Cable Station, where he dipped his wings in salute. At Lachnabou, Valentia, a short distance from the famous tetrapod footprints and Valentia Lighthouse and Visitor Centre, is the hut to where all the functioning Valentia Atlantic cables were diverted in 1934. A number of ships were used in the operation. The cables were routed underground from here to the Knightstown Cable Station. A magneto telephone allowed voice contact between the hut and the station. During World War II, Valentia and Waterville stations were guarded by the military and censors were in place. Though Ireland was a neutral country, one cable which was diverted from Waterville to bypass Ireland provided an important link in the communication system of the Allies. In 1956, the first Atlantic telephone cable, TAT1, was laid at a cost of £50 million. One voice channel on it had more bandwidth than all the telegraph cables from Ireland put together. Its arrival spelt the end of the Valentia and Waterville stations, as Western Union and the commercial cable company rented voice channels on TAT1. Call charges were $12 for 3 minutes. The first telegraph cable messages had cost $1 per letter, payable in gold, at a time when a US labourer's monthly wage was $12. Improved technology had gradually removed the need for the Waterville and Valentia telegraph cables, and in 1962 the Waterville station closed, followed by Valentia in 1966. Between 1966 and 1968, some 120 kilometres of cable were recovered from the seabed by the Carsevine company J.C. Keating and Sons, using a converted 24-metre barge named the Salvage Venture. Samples of the cable have been mounted on Valentia slate by David Howard of Evora Stone Products and are for sale in local craft shops and other outlets. On the 3rd of April 1973, the first mobile phone call was made by a Motorola employee. In 1988, the first Atlantic fibre optic cable, TAT8, carrying 40,000 simultaneous phone calls, was laid. Each fibre optic pair today could carry 150 million simultaneous phone calls. This is better and more secure than satellites. The great majority of transoceanic communications are still routed by cable. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. In the year 2000, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers listed the Kerry cable stations as a milestone in electrical engineering. Plaques were installed at the 3 stations. The following visitor centres along the trail feature the Atlantic cables. These and a viewing point are well worth visiting. Opening times vary. The exhibitions in the Old Barracks Heritage Centre in Cahersiveen include the story of the Atlantic telegraph cables. The Eighth Wonder Visitor Centre in Valentia Cable Station at Knightstown has a display of artefacts and information along with interactive panels. The displays in the Valentia Island Heritage Museum in Knightstown include cable artefacts and an extensive archive of cable photographs, as well as an old broadsheet. There is also a tourist information office here. Gceábla Mountain in Valentia has spectacular cliffs and a viewing point with fine 360-degree views of southwest Kerry, including views of sites associated with the cable expeditions. In Ballinskelligs at Café Costraw, at the edge of the beautiful Ballinskelligs beach, there is a collection of old photographs of the cable stations and the cable landings, as well as information. Cable information is also available in the Skelligs Heritage Centre in nearby Dungagan. The Story of Waterville Cable Station exhibition in Tech Amergan Arts and Education Centre in Waterville gives the station's history from the 1880s up to the 1960s. It includes original equipment, artefacts, and a fascinating photo archive. The outdoor Skellig Coast Heritage Gallery on the grounds of the Skellig Gift Store bounds the Waterville Cable Station. 146 information panels mounted on massive Valentia slate slabs include several panels on the story of the Atlantic telegraph cables. There is further information on Waterville Cable Station and on T.J. Wilmot, its superintendent from 1885 to 1904, in Waterville Heritage Centre at St Michael's Church. The social, economic and cultural effects of the stations on southwest Kerry were considerable. The economic benefits of several hundred well-paid workers were great. While there had been a gradual decrease in staff for some years before the closures, there was much trauma in the area when they finally closed. The loss of the stations was deeply felt in this peripheral and marginalised area. Southwest Kerry had been at the centre of one of the greatest international undertakings of all time. It has been compared to putting a man on the moon, and coincidentally, the 340,000 miles of copper and iron wire in the first cable was more than enough to reach the moon or to encircle the Earth 13 times. The short-lived 1858 success received greater international acclaim than the moon landing received later. The disappointment at the 1857 failure and the short life of the 1858 cable were more than compensated for by the great roles of the Valentia and Heart's Content cable stations in the laying in 1866 of the world's first permanent telegraph cables between Valentia and Heart's Content. It is earnestly hoped that the Valentia and Heart's Content cable stations will receive the UNESCO World Heritage Site status which they so richly deserve. The great achievement of 1866 had benefited from the lessons learned in earlier failures in Valentia and the White Strand and in the short-lived 1858 success. Building on the 1866 achievement and improving technology, the cable stations of Ballinskelligs and Waterville went on to play other crucial roles in confirming southwest Kerry as the 19th century centre of global communications. The Atlantic Telegraph Cables Trail is dedicated to the memory of Mortimer Moriarty, whose role in the project was vital. Without him, it simply would not have happened.